Hello, good evening, and welcome to PM Express. My name, as always, is Stephen Enti. Tonight, we'll put the size of government debate on the discussion table, and we will talk through it. And if you recall, recently, the Constitutional Review Commission, following its work, prescribed that there should be no changes to the qualification and mode of appointment of ministers and deputy ministers. But the manner of appointments in recent times has attracted public debate and interest, with some suggesting that members must at least be screened before they're appointed. And the MPP's Nana Akomia has suggested blatantly that without this screening process, round ministers are fitted into square positions, resulting in underperformance and inefficiencies in government business. What is more, the president has a gargantuan powers, huge powers, to appoint with no cap on just how many ministers is enough for any administration. The debate has raged on for days on the size of President Mahama's government. Tonight, we'll put the subject matter in context, and then going back into time, we will compare with the Kufuor administration, the size, the consideration, and the manner of appointments. You can join us on the show by sending your comments to text code 1760 across our network, or you can post your comments on our Facebook or facebook.com/Joy News. Or if you are active on Twitter, our Twitter handle is Joy News on TV. And my guest tonight is political science lecturer Dr. Ziblim Idi, who we're grateful to have in the studio. And then next to him, we have policy analyst Atiq Mohammed. We're also grateful to have him. And then later on in the show, we'll get onto the phone lines and speak to Kojo Impieni, who is a former chief of staff. So, gentlemen, it's great to have you on PM Express. Dr. Ziblim has been on our platform a couple of times, but I think you have not. So it's great to have you on the show. So maybe I should just tease your brains first before I come to Dr. Ziblim. Do you think that Mahama's government is really big?
Let me say good evening to our cherished viewers. I personally think, yes, it is. And people have raised questions about which yardstick are we using.
So you think that the intense debate is justifiable?
Very much so, very much so. And I think that this debate is even long overdue. We should have had it a very long time ago. People often say that, by what measure are you saying this government is big? But commonsensically or even operationally, one would realize that you don't need to have about 86 ministers to run a government that is supposed to superintend over a 25 million population. It doesn't make sense. By 1954, Nkrumah had only 10 cabinet ministers, and they were able to oversee the implementation of major policies up until the time he became the president and so on. The question has always been the efficiency of the persons you are appointing. And let's not forget that ministers are not technocrats. They are not the people who do a lot of the planning. What they do is to provide political leadership and to excite the will that you need from the political class to be able to have some decisions implemented. That is all that there is to the work of a minister. So you don't need to have three of them doing virtually the same thing. It leads to some sense of redundancy. For instance, I take a ministry like information, where you have three people supposedly occupying ministerial positions, and they do virtually the same thing. You wouldn't have the deputy speaking in the presence of the minister. So they are supposed to be complementary. Let me take the deputies, for instance. They're supposed to be complementing the efforts of the minister, which means that in the presence of the minister, the deputy ministers have very minimal roles to play. And oftentimes, a ministry like Ministry of Information and Media Relations, what they do is to tell us sometimes things we know already, or to tell us things that are happening within the presidency or within government that we are not privy to. And I think that one person should be able to do that. You don't need to have three people doing virtually the same thing. In addition, you have all kinds of communication groups that are purporting to be speaking for government. And I strongly believe that you can have one person. That is why you have a huge bureaucracy behind you as a minister. Their job is to do the planning. Their job is to do the thinking. Yours is to give it that political gravitas and to see things happening. So you don't need to have as many ministers.
I'm told that Kojo Impieni has joined us on the phone, and he's in a meeting, and he had to make time to speak with us. So good evening, sir, and thanks for joining us on PM Express.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good. The debate over the size of government, Mahama's government now estimated that his government size will be about 85, and that of the previous administration for which you were part is just shy of about 2 or 3 more. Do you think that this debate of Ghanaians being concerned about the size of government is really on? I mean, considering that the previous government didn't exactly have a lean government anyway.
Well, but I don't think that should stop the Ghanaians from debating whether we should have a lean government or not. Yes, the previous government was a big government. The current one is also very big. But I think Ghanaians have the right to debate the issue to find out whether we benefit from big governments or not. If, in our wisdom, we think that government should be lean, then should come up with reasons why we think government should be lean, and also how lean should it be, and how effective should that lean government be. So the debate, I believe, there's nothing wrong about it.
So if I heard you, is that to suggest that your opinion is that the size of Mahama's government is not exactly a problem?
No, that's not what I'm saying. You talked about the size of the current government and then compared it to the size of the previous government. And if I heard you right, I thought you said whether it was because of this, whether it was necessary for Ghanaians to debate the size of our government.
Yes,
and exactly. I'm saying yes, the Ghanaians can still debate it. There's nothing wrong for Ghanaians to debate whether we want to keep a large government, we want to keep a slim government.
Right.
I believe the most important thing is how efficient the government is. And if, in our wisdom, we think we can reduce the size of government and still be very efficient, fine. Let's talk about it and see if it can be done. If it can be done and we have to keep a large government for it to be efficient, then we continue with what we have.
No, so when we look at the situation currently, I mean, we are faced as a country with a lot of crisis, I should call it, energy, water, and then workers going on strike, agitation for more salary. And the president himself has said that the meat is down to the bones. I mean, the state purse is suffering. Do you think that perhaps that's the more reason why this debate about size, government size, has become more intense?
Well, if you want my personal opinion on it, I believe we can reduce the government. Even though I was part of last government, I believe from my experience we can reduce the government and still be efficient.
And how,
so that's my opinion.
And how can that be done?
From what I saw when I was in government, I sincerely believe that you can go down the number of the ministers, deputy ministers, especially deputy ministers, and still be efficient, because there were some ministries where the deputy ministers were virtually on holiday, especially if they don't get on well with their ministers. The ministers may not even give them some work to do. And I have complaints from some deputy ministers about behavior of ministers who are not giving them jobs to do. So if you're a deputy minister, you don't have any work to do. And if the minister is able to work without your input and the minister efficient, then one have to critically look at it and think and find out whether in all ministries you have deputies or not. But this is my personal opinion.
Right, Mr. Pianim, I mean, you've spoken extensively about efficiency. I mean, for you, the efficiency is important. How do we get efficiency? Do we get that efficiency by having a large government? And then if we do not, I mean, how do we work around maintaining or sustaining the same efficiency with a smaller size government?
Well, this is why I try to give an example of some deputy ministers complaining to me. Even you can look at all the ministries. There are ministries you maybe want to have more than even one minister. Take a place like a Ministry of Education. It's a very huge ministry, starting from the kindergarten or whatever, all the way up to the tertiary, so that we have quite a large institution where I believe you need good people to look at, to be able to look at the ministry, to supervise the ministry, to be able to give us efficient services. So such a ministry, I don't think there will be anything wrong with having more than one deputy for such a ministry. But you can look at some areas, say, if you take, say, a regional minister, I may take, say, a region, like, say, an Upper East region, a Central region, relatively smaller regions. So you ask yourself, do you really need deputies for these regions? So I believe we can critically look at these ministries, devoid of any partisanship, and then come to some conclusion and say that we believe there are some of them where you will need deputies, and not just deputies who are efficient to be able to help the ministers achieve the aims of the government.
Right. Mr. Pianim, did the MPP administration and the former President Kufuor have a formula for arriving at the size of government, or, you know, the quantum of ministers and deputies required to run an efficient government?
A formula for what?
I'm asking if the MPP administration, of which you were part, had a particular formula for arriving at a size of government that will be suitable to deliver efficiency.
I don't think so. I'm not sure. I don't really think so.
So you don't know.
I really don't think so.
Yeah. So you don't know.
You know, the question of ministers, and once again from my own perspective or what I saw, that, you know, at times you satisfy you satisfy areas, regions, ethnicity. You know, these ones are there, these ones are not there, and you must be able to bring everybody on board. So at times, maybe my own observation is that probably we'll be able to maybe three, but then look at it as, but this area is not represented. So let me find a way of bringing somebody from that area to come in. And then instead of three, you may move to 4 or 5.
Right. Mr. Pianim, we'll still hold you briefly. We'll later come to you to pick your brains on whether you think that there should be particular modes in choosing ministers and deputy ministers. I'll come to the studio. So, Dr. Zibilim, you heard Mr. Pianim, and I picked two things from his explanation about formula. I mean, although he said that he wasn't particularly sure whether there was a formula, he mentioned ethnicity, he mentioned regional balance. Do you think that in forming a government, any president who has the powers, of course, by the Constitution, to form a government should be thinking about regional balance, ethnicity, and all of those things?
Yeah, thank you, and good evening to your viewers. I think, first of all, let me say that I'm very glad that the former Chief of Staff has actually been very frank in his submission, in actually admitting that even the government that he works with, he thinks that personally there were some problems in terms of the size of the government. When presidents form governments, they come under pressure from so many factions. Now, the question as to whether they should consider regional balance, religious balance, and all of that are not stated in the Constitution, but they are conventions that every government since 1992 have followed. Because you have to do certain things that would endanger cohesion, national cohesion, so that no region of the country will feel left out. I remember under the Kufuor regime for a long time, Upper West, was not represented, and there were a lot of noise being made about that. So governments over the years have learned not to exclude any particular group, region, or religion, or ethnic, whatever, from their government. Now, the question of the size of government has actually bedeviled a lot of countries. It's not just Ghana. In the 80s, I remember even the UK, the US, all these major countries, when they started experiencing economic difficulties, were looking at whether the size of government was too much and whether that was having a toll on the economy. And it has always been a very difficult exercise to get a very fair balance of size and efficiency. And one of the things I was even more impressed about his submission was the fact that he hit on the nail, efficiency. And the debate that is going on, what is lost in this whole debate is people try to separate the question of competence from the question of size. And if you want to analyze it the way he was talking about efficiency, you have to talk about competence. That it is possible that you can have one minister and you will have a minister with one deputy. If they are so competent and very comfortable in the area that they have been assigned to, they can manage it much, much better than having 2 deputies or 3 deputies under one minister. So I think that if our president, first of all, you have to look at the number of ministers we have. And so you grant that as for substantive ministers, you can't do anything about it, as he was suggesting. So you need a substantive minister for all the 10 regions. You need substantive ministers for all the sector ministries that we have. Once you go below that, you can't pick and choose which ministries should have 1, 2, 1, 2. As for 3, it's outrageous. I don't even think anybody can justify why you need 3 deputies at one ministry. Even with education, where everybody agrees that it's a huge, sector ministry, you don't need 3 deputies. And so, as he was suggesting,
why?
Well, if you get 2 competent deputy ministers, the minister is still there. So those who say that for education you need 3 deputies, they suggest that you need a deputy for basic, a deputy for secondary, a deputy for tertiary. So what will the substantive minister be doing? Now, so if you have a substantive minister and you can combine, tertiary is not as big as basic and secondary. Of course, we are getting more private universities, springing up and all that, but it is still a small sector compared to basic and secondary. So you can have 1 deputy minister looking at tertiary, 1 deputy minister and the substantive minister looking at basic and secondary.
Right, Dr. Zibley, I'll cut you in. I'm told that Mr. Mpianim would need to quickly wrap up because he's in a meeting. So I'll go back to you. Mr. Mpianim, if you're still there, I mean, we are discussing the competencies of appointees, government appointees. So in pursuing these competencies, tell me what, in your opinion, what we should, as a nation, be considering to ensure that we get the right people for the right positions.
I believe, first and foremost, there must be some sort of a basic education. I don't know if I'll say up to the tertiary level but if you have somebody up to tertiary level, then his ability to read, understand, analyze issues may be better than somebody who hasn't gotten that. Then experience. If somebody comes straight from the university, and then he's made, say, a deputy minister, it's a very complex job for being a minister. So what experience is he bringing even onto the job? And I was just talking to my colleagues and friends and saying that if any of us had any business, and he had to employ somebody to come and head that business, or to be a deputy to that business, definitely he won't pick somebody who just say left university, hasn't worked in his or her lifetime, or maybe a year or 2 to come and be the head of that institution. Because in your private life, you won't do that. So how should you put such a person in charge of the country's, in the running of the country? The person may want to do his best, but he has no experience. So it becomes a problem. And I believe we also know ourselves. It's a small country, we know ourselves, we maybe work together, or in school together, and therefore maybe we allow the head of, say, the president to look among his colleagues and say that this is the right person for this job. We do ourselves, I think, a great deal of good. Then instead of forcing people onto the head of state or the president, people who may be all right theoretically, maybe doctorate in a subject or something, but the real experience on running any institution Forget about the ministry.
Mr. Biani, if you talk about forcing the president, are you suggesting perhaps the president could be subtly influenced by maybe people in his party? I mean, because the Constitution clearly gives the president the power.
That's what I'm saying. Within your own party itself, within any party you have divisions, the factions and whatnot. So you see a lot of pressure coming from within the party of trying to convince the president to appoint Mr. A or Madam B. Maybe if this pressure is not on President Trust may not be that person. But it becomes the pressure may be so much that at times the president may give up and say, okay, if there's a person you want, let's put him there or put her there and try him.
So did your government, the MPP government, face these kinds of pressures, perhaps, which is the reason why Nana Komia suggested that putting square pegs into round holes could be problematic? Did your government face similar pressures?
Fortunately for yes, pressures, yes. That one, pressures, yes. But fortunately, because President Gouveia has been in government, I think two governments, the government Buzia and for a very short time in
PNDC.
PNDC. He has the ability to resist some of these pressures, and also, his own way of approaching issues is able to convince people to sort of, well, maybe you suggested somebody, I believe is maybe good, but I don't think that this is the right thing for that person. Right. Let's see through the system and see if we can get something. So another thing for that person, which I believe he may be able to tackle better than putting him or her as a deputy or as a minister.
Right.
Pressures are there.
Yeah.
And I believe he had a lot of the pressures.
Yeah.
But fortunately for him, his own temperament, his own experiences, he was, for at least since when I became the chief of staff, I knew some instances where he was able to sort of quietly discuss issues with people and put them, let them be satisfied that he's not just throwing about or not.
So, Mr. Biani, let me stop you there. I mean, you mentioned that the former president's disposition, his experience, etc., made him sometimes quietly consult people about specific choices that he was going to make. I mean, if I'm putting it in a good context. I mean, does this mean that you support the idea of pre-screening people before they're nominated?
Oh, of course, you must pre-screen. That's extremely important. Before a president appoints anybody, you have some group of people to help him to pre-screen. That is extremely important. Otherwise, somebody may come in and you become it's important to have a pre-screen.
So did you?
Let them avoid some words and just say it's very important to pre-screen.
Right. So did you, in your tenure as chief of staff, perhaps, would you know if there were any persons who were perhaps disqualified or shoved off the list through the kind of pre-screening you're describing?
Oh, sure. I'm aware of quite a number of people.
Will you be
kind who were sort of other pre-screen?
Would you be kind to give us
qualification, either some issues which are not known to the public, whether we believe it comes to the public, the name may be embarrassing to.
Does any particular person come to mind?
Do I?
Does any particular person come to mind? Who
no. You expect me to come on this thing and tell you, Mr. A or Mr. B or so? No.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pieni.
You're welcome.
We're grateful for your time. Mr. Kwame Pieni is former chief of staff. So let me come to the studio. I shift the discussion a bit to Ablakwa's statement. I'm sure you may have read a Blackwell statement on my jaw online, and in part of the statement, he said that, in my personal view, therefore, in order for the nation to make progress after this debate and not leave this very important matter to become an empty cycle of mere talk every 4 years, we need to begin paying attention to pragmatic things we can do moving forward to show that we are strengthening our resolve to protect the public purse. As we nurture and grow our democracy, therefore, we can decide not only to keep our eyes on the numbers of ministers, but most importantly, keep an eye on the following. So I'll take bit by bit and then we'll discuss. He says, 1, maintain and enforce the decision to abolish special assistance and special aids to ministers paid by the state, except that ministers can hire such persons as they pay them privately, thus from their own resources if they wish. No, I'll stop you. Maybe you would like to react to something that Mr. Pienim said, so that we'll move on.
Not necessarily react, but probably add a bit to what he has said. I think that I made the earlier point that we need to downsize the the number of ministers we have constituting or forming a government. And he's talked about the fact that it is something we can do, even though they didn't do it. But the point I wish to make is the issue is about efficiency. And you necessarily don't have to conduct any survey to realize that you don't need so many numbers in order to ensure efficiency. Efficiency is attained when you do some analysis of how much cost is involved in the input and the outcomes you get. So, for instance, we take the cost of managing one minister, and we juxtapose that with the outcomes that we get from that minister. It is easy to tell whether indeed it is cost efficient maintaining that minister. Like he was frankly admitting that there were some deputy ministers without responsibilities.
And they had virtual holidays.
Exactly. And they were being serviced at the cost of the common man. It was our tax that was used to service these people all along. Which means that if you look at the investment we're making into these people and the outcomes that we were getting, certainly cost efficiency does not come anywhere close to what these people were giving us. So you can tell that there are some ministers you don't need to have in order to ensure efficiency. If you have just even, and for me, I find it quite surprising that the NDC preached heavily. As part of their war cries in 2008, the argument was there had been so many people in government, and that adds to our collective expenditure as a state in managing people who are in government. And we all agreed and identified with that particular argument. But what happened? And this phrase, lean government, became commonplace when we were doing the campaigns in 2008. Yeah. But what happened? We actually saw an increase in the number of ministers, and the special assistance that Okujeto is now talking about was a concept they promised to scrap. And for me, I don't even think that we have ministers and special assistants who are paid by the state as we speak today. Probably it was something that was happening some 4 years ago, or some 5 or 6 years ago. But in this dispensation, apart from special aids to the president, I don't think we have special aids to ministers who are being taken care of by the public.
Special assistants and they're...
No, as for those titles, it is easy to, issue them out to people. But as to whether indeed they draw salaries from the consolidated fund is another matter. And for me, I think that it is a practice that we have stopped. Even though at the presidency, you still have some of these things operating. And we can do away with them. I mean, you don't need to have... You have the chief of staff, you have the secretary to the president, you have people who are helping the president. You don't need special aids. And in the times of His Excellency, the late Professor Mills, he had so many of them to the extent that I was even beginning to ask myself, what does it take to become a special assistant to the president? Some you wanted to even ask, and that is where this issue of competence comes in, and I'm sure we'll discuss it. Some people do not add any value to whoever they are supposed to be supporting. They are virtually a liability, if that word is permissible. And in addition to that, we are paying them, we are servicing them. They draw free fuel, they have cars, and so on and so forth. So if you look at the cost of managing all these people and the outputs that they give us, that is where I suggest, and I strongly believe that it is doable to have, to downsize the number of people we call ministers, and we still can get the kind of efficiency that we want. All we need to do is to make sure that this idea of pre-screening I don't know how that is going to be done. But the onus is on the president or the appointing authority to realize that it's not just about picking anybody because you want to satisfy regional or ethnic balance. And I agree with this idea
or satisfy party cronies or pressure from within.
We all recognize that
patronage,
political patronage is a recipe for so many things, including corruption, inefficiency, and so on and so forth. And it is because of these pressures that you call from party cronies that lead to patronage, so that you appoint anybody who is not even qualified. Because that person is said to have been in the trenches, as is often said, you think necessarily the person must be rewarded with a political position. At the end of the day, you compromise the collective good just to satisfy that petty personal interest. And I think that this idea of working out regional balances, ethnic balances, don't help, because at the end of the day, you force yourself into a corner that you make choices that necessarily do not add anything to the ambition of growing Ghana or moving Ghana forward.
I'm sure you must have followed the recent problem in part of the northern region where a group closed down the National Health Insurance offices because they claimed that an appointment that was made did not reflect, or the people who were appointed did not come from.
It is because we have tolerated that subculture that necessarily it is a matter of obligation to satisfy the interests of people who are perceived to have voted for you. And politicians have fallen for it. You see, this election cycle comes with a lot of problems. Politicians at all costs always think that we must win, we must be in power, we must win the next election. So they do things necessarily not to satisfy the common good, but to ensure that they continue to stay in power. That is why people can hold governments, in fact, sometimes to ransom, hold politicians to ransom, simply because they will tell you that, oh, we voted for you, you get most of your votes from our area, yet when it comes to appointments, you ignore us. And for all you know, the president did his own assessment of the people coming from that area, and he did not find anybody suitable for any position. But because we easily fall prey, and this is not specific to any political party, we are all guilty of it, all political parties are, that you want people to say that, as for you, I care about you. Cheap populism, I would want to call it. And in the long view, it comes back to haunt you. And I was suggesting that there was this coalition, the Constitutional Review Coalition, which was a project of UNDEF, United Nations Development Fund, and the IEA. I happened to be a part of that coalition. And I was making a suggestion that, look, our constitution is so flexible in the sense that there are some provisions, especially relating to the competence of who can become an MP or a minister. All you need to do is just to be a Ghanaian, be sane as to whether that can even be examined or even be determined, and be of voting age. You can become a minister. Which means that somebody who has never been to class one, who doesn't even appreciate anything, can become a minister. We need to have some kind of fleshing up of some of these provisions, so that it is not just about anybody who is a Ghanaian, who is of age, and who is supposed to be sane. We need to add some competence clauses, so that at the end of the day, by those provisions, people will not hold you to ransom, people will not blame you very much for making some kinds of choices that in the long view will inure to everybody's benefit.
Right, you're watching PM Express, and my name is Stephen Enti. I have in the studio Atik Mohammed, who's a policy analyst, and Dr. Ziblim Idi, who is a political science lecturer from the University of Ghana. We're grateful for Kojum Pinim, former chief of staff, who joined us on phone a while ago. We'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll delve into the constitutional provision of who qualifies and who doesn't qualify, and perhaps pan it back to recommendations from the Constitutional Review Commission. Stay with us. Welcome back to PM Express. We are discussing the size of government debate. Now, when we talk about size of government, we wouldn't lose sight of the fact that the individuals or persons that are appointed as ministers and deputy ministers, their qualification could be very, very important in determining efficiency, as we've been discussing. So, Dr. Adi, let me shift the debate a bit to discuss Article 78 of the 1992 Constitution, which provides that the ministers of state shall be appointed by the President with the prior approval of Parliament from among members of Parliament or persons qualified to be elected as members of parliament. Now, the Constitutional Review Commission in their work recommended that there should be no constitutional change to this qualification and mode of appointment of ministers and deputy ministers of state. Do you agree?
Well, largely yes, because beyond somebody being qualified to be a member of parliament, and a lot of conditions have to be met before one is qualified to be a member of parliament. What really may come to mind is how about educational background, how about experience in terms of work history and all of that. But if you put it in the Constitution, then you tie the hands of the president. That sometimes some people may not necessarily have those specific conditions in terms of educational background and work experience, but the president in his dealings with them on the political field may be comfortable working with them. So you have to leave those things out. And that is where our problem is. I always say that because a constitution, if the constitution were to give answers to all our problems, then it will come in volumes.
Yeah.
Right. So the constitution sometimes will give you a guide. And so if you think that the constitution is saying to become a minister, you have to qualify to be a parliamentarian. The question you ask is, beyond just being 18 or 22 to be a parliamentarian,
of sound mind,
you need somebody who can be in the legislature, appreciate the issues, debate on them, to make laws. And if somebody can do that, then the same person can be put in a ministry where he can operate. Now, let me come back to the size, because I'm glad you've mentioned this constitution. There is no scientific study out there that has actually given us, guide as to what is big and what is small. But the Constitution has given us a sense of guide, and we all lose sight of it. The Constitution talks about cabinet being minimum of 10, maximum of 19.
I see.
And cabinet is the center, the bulwark of your ministers. So if the Constitution, sort of contemplated that you can only have maximum ceiling of 19 ministers, I don't see how you can move from 19 to 85. So you don't need actually a scientific study to say that 85 is outrageous. What I will suggest...
Perhaps the 19 is unreasonable?
Or? No, when they say 19, that is for cabinet. But you can go beyond 19 to appoint other sector ministers. Because not all your ministers will be in cabinet. But I'm saying that if they give a ceiling of 19 for cabinet, which is supposed to be the bulwark of your ministerial executive work, you don't need to jump from 19 to 80 something. I will play it with civil society, and maybe even the president, he can take advantage of that. We just listened to a very brilliant submission from a former chief of staff. We are fortunate in this country to have at least 3 or 4 living former chief of staffs. Achudade is there, he is there, and then Henry Martin. If we can get a civil society organization like the IEA or the Center for Democracy to get these people together and let them bring to bear their experience in dealing with how to form government as far as the issue of size of ministers or size of government is concerned, you come out with something that will guide us going forward. So we should take advantage of that. I'm very impressed about his submission this evening, and I think that if they will come to the table with candid views in terms of areas that you really need deputies and areas that you don't need deputies. Look, if you do that exercise today, you will really cut down the numbers from 85, I will say, to around 60, thereabout. If you go to the Ministry of Information, Gender,
Agric and so on.
Well, Agric, you don't need 3 or 2. One,
maybe you need one for fisheries, you need one for...
What people forget is if you go to every ministry, you have chief directors who are technocrats, and you don't just have one chief director for the Ministry of Agric. Every area, even engineer, you have director, crops, you have director, fisheries, you have director. So these are technocrats who are managing the day-to-day with civil servants. So a minister with one deputy can coordinate and manage and give policy direction to what they do. Now, in terms of competence, because I mentioned earlier on that we can't take away the issue of competence when you are talking about size. And I will say, and I have to be very frank, that I was really disappointed, especially the last batch of appointments that came.
26
the
deputy
26, yeah, the 26. I was very disappointed, and it makes one feel whether there is some pressure on the president to appease, certain, groups or certain factions within his party. Because seriously, even though the Constitution stops at if you are 18 of sound mind and all of that, we all know that, as the former chief of staff said, beyond education, you need experience. You see, running a ministry, whether you are a substantive or deputy, need a certain level of temperament, which means that you are so not just sound in mind, but matured enough to handle issues as they come to you as a deputy minister. And if you just left school 2-3 years ago, you probably would have come out with flying colors, first class, whatever. But if you have not worked in an environment that will bring you up, I always cite, Ibn Chambers, who was 37 when he was appointed Deputy Secretary for Foreign Affairs with a PhD, and of course with 2 degrees in law at 37. And yet he was left there to understudy Obeta Samoa for almost 10 years as deputy minister. So today, when people say young people should be given opportunity, yes, people like that were given opportunity. They understudy a senior citizen, somebody who is more versatile in politics. Today, what do we see? Young people being appointed to go and work under
out of university.
Exactly, to go and work under people who can only claim of experience maybe the last 2-3 years under the Mills administration, and they are the substantive ministers that these young people are going to understudy. So you ask yourself, and we don't want to mention names and ministers, but what are they going to learn from even the substantive minister, who himself is still learning on the job? And I think I have to say this: the Minister of Energy. I hope that we actually mean business in this country, because there are some sector ministries that, given where we are as a country, we don't have to joke with them. Everybody in Ghana admits that we are lucky to have oil, and the way going forward we manage this oil is going to determine the future of this country. So in a country of 25 million, where you have seasoned, experienced experts in this area of energy and all of that, and this is what we can have as people that we send to that sector ministry to work. So I really hope that going forward, even as we are worried about the size of government, we'll take seriously in who any president will appoint to be a substantive minister and the deputies that he will appoint. Because then if you can get around getting competent people, you don't need 2-3 deputies to support them.
Right. I mean, if you look at this debate that we are talking about qualification and competence, does it perhaps make you think that the Constitutional Review Commission should have perhaps clipped the president's powers as is captured in the Constitution?
Not necessarily, but it should have. I mean, if we introduce or insert competence clauses into those sections that talk about appointment or the qualification of people to be appointed to various positions, I don't think necessarily it will be an attempt to clip the president's wings, but it is actually to guide him to make right choices that would, in the long view, enhance our development as a state. But for me, I think that some of these appointments that have been made, to put it bluntly, I really was very disappointed.
Look, are there particular people who come to
some
your
ministries? I wouldn't mention names, but I'll mention the ministries.
Energy, Dr. Eddie.
And I'll add my voice to that. Look, the substantive both, and this is without any intention of sounding contemptuous to your competences, but frankly speaking, both the substantive and the deputy seriously don't fit, especially considering where we are as a state. I mean, Ghana is going through a lot of economic stress, largely because of some kinds of mismanagement that have been occasioned to us. And a ministry as energy, as sensitive as energy, you would require some expertise. Those are the ministries I refer to as technical ministries: energy, finance, and so on. These are ministries you don't just pick anybody who you think you want to reward and send there. Do you know that if you read reports of last year, expenditure incurred by the ministry and the agencies that fall under the ministry, you can't help but to be very angry. To the extent that millions of Ghana cedis were expended on what they call capacity building. We've all been beneficiaries or participants, and in some cases we've even designed programs for capacity building. But if you look at the quantum of money that went into these kinds of capacity buildings, you would want to wonder whether they were teaching them or they were taking them through programs to become NASA scientists or to become rocket scientists. And you ask yourself, what has Ghana gained as a result of that kind of capacity building? The substantive minister at the Ministry of Energy himself is not an energy expert. And Ghana has a lot of them. Look, people have gone to upgrade themselves.
So what? I mean, are you suggesting that possibly the president should have looked outside his party?
No, there are people even within his party. And I know somebody who is now a parliamentarian. He was once a deputy minister even for that particular ministry. He did not last long for only reasons known to them. They sacrificed him, who is a great expert. I've had the occasion of being in some discussions. And when he's talking, and when he's discussing energy, you know this is a man who knows his stuff. He was sacrificed. He has made it to parliament, and he's only a chairman of the energy committee. But this is somebody whose expertise, his candor, his general persona would have contributed significantly to optimizing against in that particular ministry. But he's been gone. I mean, he's been asked to go. And another person who was
Are you not indirectly lobbying for someone else?
No, I can't influence. I'm not I can't influence the president's decision. But there are some. I personally feel that the last 24 appointments he made were just job for the boys and girls. To the extent that, like Doc was saying, you need some experience. Running a ministry is not like running a kiosk or what we call a tea in the place where I come from. You need some experience. You need to have studied some kind of management before you can get into it. But these are on-the-job training for the boys and girls. And I don't think that in this present situation that we find ourselves, we can afford the luxury of training boys and girls on the job. We need people who have already had it, who have already had the training, who have already made it. Because to get ourselves out of this problem, you don't need to be experimenting with youngsters. In as much as I agree that we need to empower our youth, but like Doc said, there are several ways to empower our youth. Look, you don't necessarily need to make somebody a minister to empower the person. And youth empowerment necessarily does not even mean that you give people ministerial positions. At the end of the day, how many young people can get to benefit directly from the position you have given to that person? In the long view, it becomes a personal glorification, if you like. But empowerment of the youth means that you create opportunities, you fix young people where their colleagues can benefit, can learn, and can get inspiration from. But to send them to ministries, sometimes you send them there and they fail. I don't want to mention a name of the minister.
Dr. Edi, quickly, you want to react to it.
I wanted to comment on the Blackwell's speech because I had the opportunity to read it. And first of all, I think I will commend him for even having the courage to, get into the whole debate. But unfortunately, if you read the whole piece, it's so deficient in logic, and it's not actually upright with the facts. Why do I say deficient in logic? When you say numbers do not necessarily mean correspond to cost, it's not logical.
It's not true.
I mean, because then you have to do simple multiplication of how much does it cost multiplied by the number. So there's, and in terms of being not upright with the facts, let your cameraman go outside tomorrow and just do their own survey, independent, to find out how many ministers in this country do not have aides, do not have drivers, do not have cooks, do not have, how many? He himself, he benefited from all of that. And we know people have been in governments before the NDC, so when you are speaking, you should know that there are other people who also went through it and they experienced this. And so it's not true that not every minister has all the specs. That is one. And sometimes when people make the argument that the president gets paid less than chief executives and ministers have to cut down, they forget that there are certain things a minister gets that is priceless. You can't put a price on it. The prestige that comes with being a minister. How many rich people in this country can drive with sirens and, bypass traffic and all of that? All of those things, if you add them together, they are making them feel more comfortable where they are than where they left. So but I will comment him, and I think I will, because then it is high time we get people in government to be speaking, so that we can read their minds and know where they are coming from with their facts.
He attempted to debunk the notion. I mean, I think this was a counter article to an article earlier written by somebody, and he was trying to debunk the idea that ministers don't get some of the things the man was suggesting, or the author of the earlier article was suggesting, like having cooks, gardening boys. Look, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. We all know. These are the things that come with being a minister. Are you telling me that the minister pays for the cost of a cook? These are all things that, look, it is in your appointment letter that a chauffeur will be provided for you. Cars will be given to you. And I listened to him react to some of these concerns. That, when you come and there is an old car, you will drive. I mean, let's be frank. Which minister will come and drive an old car? They give you a 4x4 car. They add you a saloon car, new and so on. When you are going, the option is even given to you to purchase it and go away with it. So and this idea of, it is not necessarily the case that the bigger the number, the more the cost. This is arithmetic. I wouldn't even extend it to logic. Look, if the cost of managing one minister is 2 cedis, by 10 you get 20. If it extends to 80, you can imagine the cost. That's 160.
Sure.
So the more the number, the more the cost. And look, you have improved your own conditions. Now you used to take somewhere 3,000. It has shot to 9,000. Look at the difference between what you used to take and what you are taking now. And he's talking about some chief executives taking more, and for which reason they are also justified to take much more money. For me, the issue is not even about the money, but let's look at your efficiency. How many of you are efficient in the positions you have occupied? And I think that the debate, I think that even though it is good to start the debate, but we should get to a point where we would all agree that, look, operationally speaking, number 80 and beyond is a great number. And don't give us an indication. I was making a point, even commonsensically, 40 ministers. Nkrumah was able to run, when he became the head of government business, from 1954, when he became the prime minister, until 1957, he had only 10 cabinet ministers.
Yeah, but people have argued that the population then was lower.
Exactly. So look at, if our population then was around 6 million, and he could manage with 10, and the regions we have today were in existence. It is not as if we've gone to add some part of Togo or Burkina to Ghana. It is still the same Ghana that we have. So I think that we can run an efficient government with lean numbers, with small numbers. The only thing we need to do is to divest ourselves as politicians of this thing about patronage that has bogged us down. People want to satisfy all kinds of interests. And let me just refer a bit to the MPP government. All kinds of ministerial titles were created. Senior minister, beautification of Accra. I mean, these are all positions created to satisfy one interest or the other. And these people are equally guilty of it, but are pretending as if, it is difficult to run away from. We can do it. It is just a matter of saying, this is the right thing, and let's do it.
Policy analyst. Dr. Eddie, your closing remarks, a few seconds.
Well, I think I will go back to what I said earlier on, that I would call on the civil society to encourage the use of existing former chief of staffs for us to, for once, do serious thinking into what is a reasonable size of government for this country.
And would you say that, 56 years on after independence, now we're discussing size of government and quality of persons that form a government. Would you see that as a failure on our part?
No, it's not. Remember, earlier on I indicated that in the 1980s, when Reagan was president and Thatcher was prime minister, even the UK and the US were debating size of government. And this was after 200 years of practicing democracy. It has always, especially when an economy is going through difficulties, you have to look at the size of government.
Have to look
and that is even what is more worrying for some of us, worrisome, that when this material movement, this country is going through difficulties, we are rather increasing size of government. And when people are pushing it as a debate,
that comes with it.
so this call I'm making is very important. The CDD, the IEA, and they should seriously think about constituting this former chief of staffs to once come out with something,
but
which may be a
not
guide.
To disagree. I'm sure our time is up, but not to disagree with you. You see, you can have all civil society groups agreeing that this is how it should be, but you need commitment from the political class.
We need commitment. We need leadership.
I think that Patronage is the problem. You are forced by patronage to make all kinds of appointments. Let's be bold as politicians. Let's say, for want of a better expression, to hell with this election cycle. I must do the right thing even for once if they vote against me. And I'm sure we can do it. Lean government, every president knows that I can run a government with some lean numbers. But the point is, Konkomba Youth Association will say, oh, we voted for you, you didn't give us any minister. Let's be bold to say we'll resist the patronage, we'll resist the pressures, and I'm sure we can run lean governments with efficiency.
Thank you very much. That was Atik Mohammed, policy analyst, and thanks to you, Dr. Ziblim Idi, political science lecturer, University of Ghana. Thanks to you also, Kojo Mpiani, former chief of staff, and thanks to you for making time with us on PM Express. My name is Stephen Anti. Join us again tomorrow for another edition of the show. Good night. Thank you.